Good afternoon, and thanks for joining our screening series webinar, How to Hire Better People in Less Time for Less Money with Assessments. My name is Jenny Drinker, and I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances here at PeopleMatter. I'll be your moderator today. I just want to cover some basic housekeeping items before we begin. First, we welcome your questions throughout the webinar. All you need to do is type them into the question window on the GoToWebinar control panel to the right and hit submit. We'll get to as many questions as we can during our Q&A session at the end after the main presentation. And second, I am recording today's webinar, and we will post it on the PeopleMatter website within about 24 hours. So we'll make sure to send you an email once it's up in case you want to watch it again or in case you want to forward it along to a friend. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Bryan Wempen, Chief Strategy Officer at PeopleClues, and Kenny Oubre, Senior Director of Customer Success. Bryan is a 20-year human capital management professional and practitioner and has served as a corporate officer in a $650 million public firm, as well as being either a founder or founding team member of 6 companies since 2000. He is currently Chief Strategy Officer of PeopleClues, a global assessment provider to more than 1,000 clients in 8 countries. An industry expert and thought leader, Bryan also co-hosts HR's #1 internet radio show. It's called Drive Through HR, so make sure to tune in. And Bryan also presents regularly at HR and social media-focused events. Kenny leads our PeopleMatter customer success team and is part of PeopleMatter's senior management team. In his role, he directs the implementation and deployment of the PeopleMatter platform for all new customers and manages the integrations with customer third-party systems. Kenny also plays a critical role in the sales team by architecting true full-scale solutions for larger prospects. Kenny joined PeopleMatter in March 2010 and has thoroughly enjoyed playing a part in every single customer deployment and integration since our company was founded, which is pretty impressive if you ask me. So as a brief introduction, I'd also like to tell you a little bit about the relationship between PeopleClues and PeopleMatter. In August of 2012, PeopleMatter and PeopleClues rolled out a fully integrated solution that combines PeopleClues' industry-leading assessments with PeopleMatter Hire. Together, we provide a suite of employee assessment tests and benchmarking tools to identify candidates with an aptitude for service industry success. The PeopleClues partnership has been a dream for the PeopleMatter team since the start, and we really couldn't ask for a better partner. I'm very lucky to work with such a professional and experienced team. So with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Bryan Wempen. Bryan, the floor is yours.
Jenny, thank you very much. Hello and welcome to everybody. I want to just give a quick preview of what we're going to talk about. 1, how assessments have evolved over the last 15 years. 2, what assessments are for, if you're not that familiar. And 3, how the PeopleClues assessments are seamlessly integrated into the PeopleMatter system, and then we'll jump in and look to see how it all works in a live demo. So, to kick off the webinar, I'd like to take us back 15, 10, and 5 years ago. We're going to take a look in terms of Microsoft, Apple, and Google, 3 titans of the technology world. In a span of 3 years, Microsoft has been in decline, but yet still powers a dominance with their legacy presence with Windows in the marketplace. Apple's came back from the dead to find a home in almost every American household. Google came from an idea to world dominance, but not by being evil, of course. 15 years ago, we've got Microsoft launching Windows 98, which truly revolutionized the personal computer experience at every single desk. Apple began its resurgence with the launch of the iMac, which is still one of the most creative cube designs of a computer that's ever been released. And Google, well, it started and launched. 10 years ago, Microsoft, realizing it needed to branch out to other forms of revenue, introduced Xbox. And by focusing its attentions on Sony and PlayStation, stopped watching Google and Apple. Apple launched iTunes and let the world know that content distribution, music, was just as important as hardware. And Google went public at $85 a share, and today, hopefully lots of people have it, is now $750. So I think that's a pretty good rise, I would say. 5 years ago, Apple and Google launched the Android and the Apple iOS to go head-to-head with Windows in the mobile operating system market. And then you've got Microsoft, who tried to buy Yahoo for $44 billion and is very happy they did not get that done, I am sure. So one big theme that has stayed constant over that last 15 years is that technology has steadily become more widely adopted by the consumer. Whether it's conversing on Twitter, keeping up with friends on Facebook, or building your professional network in LinkedIn, technology is a part of our life. So you're all probably wondering, what does the history lesson have to do with assessments? Well, the bottom line is that with having technology in everybody's hand now, a mobile phone, there's more applicants and more availability of people connecting with you to apply to your jobs than there ever has been. So with that in mind, let's go back in history and look at assessments. So 15 years ago, assessments were exclusively used for executives. They were expensive, time-consuming to create, administer, and then interpret the results. 10 years ago, they started to move down market to managers. Management-type roles became, a little quicker because of technology starting to get a little bit better. They became a little more cost-effective. 5 years ago, technology started to make it possible so that everyone, even hourly workers, could take assessments. So what does that all mean? That means that the goal of assessments is to really keep the bad apples out and try and get as many and encourage as many of the good apples to come into the organization. So, what are assessments? It is an incredibly noisy space. There's 1,500 vendors that actually develop, provide, publish assessments in the United States. And it's roughly about 10 to 11 different types. You've got job simulations, personality, integrity, skills testing. You can measure motivation, cognitive ability. So there's lots of different things that can be measured and potentially used for screening and selection of your candidates. So what does that actually mean? Basically what that means is the more information that you can actually capture and start to interpret and predict and understand how it applies to your company and to your jobs specifically, you're able to use that data and make a lot better decisions as you go forward with your business, because ultimately that's what it is just trying to make the best decisions we can with that information. So what PeopleClues has integrated into the PeopleMatter system is 3 different assessments. We've got personality, cognitive ability, and attitude. We're actually going to start with attitude. Attitude is the screening assessment. It measures counterproductive work behaviors, and this is only used for screening. It's not mapped to a job. It just looks at people's attitudes around some negative work behaviors is another way that it can be described, around dependability, hostility in the workplace, potential substance abuse, and it looks at 2 things. It really looks at their attitudes of their own use, and it looks about attitudes of how they tolerate it actually in the workforce around them. So the other 2 parts, personality and cognitive, what we've done is we measure personality traits along with a teamwork scale that we've incorporated with that. We combine that with measuring cognitive ability, and we aggregate that up in a single report or combine it in a single report, and then you're able to compare that against the job category. So it's not a generalized measurement. It's job category specific, whether it's customer service, it could be potentially a server, a hostess, a host, a bartender, a general manager, a multi-unit manager. So there's lots of different roles that potentially you could take a look at and compare that against. the way that it works in the system is we have roughly 40 plus different job categories, as you can see, that you're able to do that comparison of the personality and cognitive in the system. So when somebody applies for a customer service role, as an example, or a customer associate, a cashier, management, sales, whatever the job is, you're then going to be able to do a comparison against a specific job category. So when the behavioral interview questions are generated, when any of the information is actually generated and put in front of your recruiter, hiring manager, HR, operator, whoever is going to be using that information, it's going to be actually job-specific information that they're using in the process. So assistant manager, interview questions pop up, interpretation questions. All of it maps specifically to what that information is. I'm going to throw it over now to Kenny to tell you a little bit about how the assessments are integrated into the PeopleMatter system.
Thanks a lot, Bryan, and good afternoon, everyone. As Bryan and Jenny introduced me, my name is Kenny Oubre, and here at PeopleMatter. And Bryan gave a really great overview of assessments in general and what their uses are. And what we have done with those assessments is we've integrated them with the job application that's offered in PeopleMatter Hire. So you can take use of the science behind the assessments that PeopleClues developed right seamlessly within the PeopleMatter system. So as you can see here in the workflow, if you're the employer, you of course would start off with configuring that job application to include those assessments. And part of doing that are using the PeopleClues job categories that Bryan just mentioned on the slide before and actually mapping those as close as possible to the jobs that you offer. So if you are a convenience store, for instance, and you've got a customer service representative, well, that's great. Well, there's a PeopleClues job category that's a customer service representative. There's also one that's a cashier, etc. On the restaurant side of things, things such as server and host, line cook, prep cook, and then, of course, the management positions as well, all mapped to the jobs that are in the job application. So then moving down on the screen here to the applicant side, when that person goes online to fill out a job application, depending on what job they've applied for, they're presented the appropriate assessments, whether that be the attitude assessment, the personality assessment, or the cognitive ability. Once that application is completed and the assessment is completed as part of that application, then you as the employer, you're able to automatically see the results of that assessment right within the PeopleMatter admin application to see the actual reports, the attitude report and the job fit report, and see that overall score, which is represented either as a recommend, so a green, meaning that you should consider moving forward with this applicant, a caution, meaning you should take a really hard look at some of the behavioral questions that are presented in the report and really dive into that a little more with that applicant, and then a discontinue, which isn't necessarily someone you should kick out. I think, Bryan, you could speak to this a little bit too. Someone you not necessarily want to say that they're going to be a bad employee or a bad team member, but there are other people that perhaps would better fit the jobs you're looking for out there. So that's kind of an overview of how the assessments really flow within the PeopleMatter system and using those assessments in a job application and then as a manager reviewing those. And I'm going to actually jump in and show some details of this in a little bit. But before we get to that, Bryan, I'm going to ask you to actually kind of go through a little bit of that job fit report and really help us understand what are the type of data that you're presenting back to the managers that they can use in their decision-making process.
Perfect. Thanks, Kenny. Well, first of all, I wanted to just kind of dovetail into what Kenny was saying, that none of this information, no single data point should be a knockout. It's the overall picture is really what the process has entailed. This is just information, just like a reference check is, just like the experience is, where they're located, their schedule. I mean, it's just a piece of information that lets you make decisions on ultimately probably who you talk to first, possibly, in organizing and prioritizing, but it's definitely not intended ever to be a knockout. So great point, Kenny. Thank you for reminding me to hit on that. So this is what we're going to look at now. Is we're going to look at 3 of the different scales that we actually present. There's a total of 7. The experience to get this all completed is less than 20 minutes. So it's a very good candidate experience, and we'll show you some things, and this is the job fit. So what we're looking at now, we had Rachel Reel had applied for a job, and so we're going to look. She applied for a customer service role, and so I'll give you some examples of what we're looking at here. So what you can see is the curve. It's referred to, this is the general reasoning scale, again, cognitive ability. And so you've got this curve, and it's referred to as a bell curve or distribution curve. I mean, different people call it different things. And there's 10 points on it. So, and then the red star is where Rachel actually scored. So all the way to the left on this scale, you have slower processing, likes repetitive work. It's just fine with that, doesn't get bored. All the way to the right on the scale would be faster processing, kind of needs that intellectual challenge, gets probably bored if they don't have that. So Rachel scored right in the middle. So the first bullet point that you would get as a hiring manager, recruiter, HR, whoever operations would be, Rachel acquires new information at average rate of speed. So kind of fits right in the middle of the population there. Rachel's better suited for customer service roles that require moderate problem-solving skills. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of that picture, and then provides a behavioral interview question specific to customer service and specific to Rachel. And that would be, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a very difficult customer. How did you handle it? So what we always get really high marks from hiring managers, because most of them, especially operations, they're not trained interviewers. They don't do it all the time because they're busy running the business and working with customers and working with their team. So when it comes to hiring, you're kind of thrown into it, and you need to do it, but you don't have a lot of confidence in doing it. So the hiring manager feedback is, we really like to have these behavioral interview questions developed for us and put in front of us so that we can feel good about what we ask in the interview. So we'll kind of jump to the next one. This is one of the other scales, conscientiousness. And so you can see that there now is a green and yellow, and we call that the benchmark underneath the actual bell curve. So for Rachel, you can see that she actually, all the way to the left of this scale is kind of carefree, impulsive personality. All the way to the right is more detail-oriented, kind of more even keel type personality. So you can see she scored pretty far to the left. So she's definitely more of that carefree kind of part of her personality. The red, yellow, green, and you'll see there's no red here. And so what that means is there's really no bad place to score on this scale, meaning that no matter where you score, you got a good chance of being successful in this role. And so with this, she's all the way to the left, and you can see Rachel. Let me see. Easygoing nature may cause Rachel to overlook important details. So you just need to know that. That's just one little bullet point. The behavioral interview question is, describe a time when you felt like you responded too quickly to a customer service issue. What happened? So great conversation with Rachel on that. Okay, so we'll jump down. Now we've got red popping up in the benchmark for the customer service kind of success profile. So with this one, all the way to the left would be cooperative, agreeable. All the way to the left is more direct, determined. And so Rachel scored all the way to the left, and now you've got this red area. And what that means, that's a higher risk kind of area within the personality within the job. So if Rachel scored in the red area, that means this is definitely an area that needs to be kind of dug into to figure out kind of what's going on, that this is a higher risk area for Rachel to be in a customer service role. And so the first bullet point is, some customers may view Rachel as pushy and confrontational, particularly when there's a difference of opinion. So you think about it, direct, determined, where they're literally like, I've got an opinion, I just want to get it out there, I know the answer, versus the cooperative, agreeable is more the listen type personality of, okay, let me let you kind of get it all out and let's figure this out together. And so Rachel's a little more to the other side. Behavioral interview question, tell me about a time when you overcame a difficult work challenge by being strong-minded and determined. What was the situation? So again, just information to kind of kind of that roadmap to help you as the interviewer, hiring manager, kind of have the best information you can and interact with your applicant or your candidate in this process. So, and then to make it even, just make it nice and simple, we offer an overall job fit score from 0 to 100. 100 would be the best fit you could possibly be. And so what this does is it gives you a very, very precise kind of calibration of where they fall. And so, the closer you are to 100, a little better fit you're going to be able to do the job at a low stress level. So the further away you get, you just need to start digging in to figure out why they're so far away from what all the data over 7 years and millions of people have suggested that this is a good fit. So you just need to figure that out and figure out what your resources are and what your business need is and what all the information tells you before you actually move on from that. So that is, I'm trying to think, I think now we're going to jump in and look at this working live in a demo with Kenny.
Thanks a lot, Bryan. So give me just a moment, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you here. So give me just a moment here. There we go. Great. Well, thanks a lot, Bryan, for that overview. So what we're going to do here for the next few moments is I'm going to show you the assessments and how that would work within a job application. And for this instance, we're going to use the PeopleMatter job application in our platform to give you this demonstration here. So what you're looking at here, everyone, is kind of a landing page for a job application that someone would come to from, let's say, your corporate website, or perhaps from a Twitter feed or a Facebook post or something of that nature. They're going to come here. And we're going to go ahead and just get started with the application. I'm going to search for a job that's in the area here. I'm going to search for one in Charleston, South Carolina. And I've got 2 locations that come up from Charleston, South Carolina. And of course, I can always view, let's see if I want to see where those locations are located on a map, so I can kind of get an understanding of where they are here. And let's say I just want to apply to this West Ashley location. And I'm going to move on forward. And of course, then I have jobs that are presented. Now, as we said, the hiring assessments are attached to specific jobs. So if I wanted to apply, let's say, to a customer service representative and a general manager position, those might have different assessments attached to them based on how you set up the configurations, on what data points you want to receive there. So in this instance, this applicant would actually receive a combination of assessments that would be for both the customer service rep and the general manager. For our sake here today, we're just going to use the customer service rep. And I'm going to move forward. I'm going to go ahead and sign in with my login here. Actually, I'm collecting an email address as an applicant. It's going to see if my email is already in the PeopleMatter system, and actually it is. So I'm just going to be able to sign in with my account here. I already have a PeopleMatter account as an applicant. I've applied at other places that have PeopleMatter, so I already have an account already made. So some simple, just basic job application items now, team, I'm going to move through for the next few minutes here, just so you get kind of a context of an application that you would see here. So I'm just going to kind of fill in a few different things. Got my location. And then put in a phone number. Just some availability. And the application here itself is quite configurable, so we can include whatever questions we want to include here. And these are all just basic questions for a job application. Employment history, I'm not going to fill these out here. Of course, you can set them required or not required. But then we do get to the hiring assessment part of the application. So again, just to pull back, we applied for a customer service rep position, so I'm going to be presented the hiring assessments attached to that particular role. So here, move through. I can collect some demographic information here. And Bryan, this information here is just for more data collection purposes, right?
Right. What we do on that is we monitor and do research around the validation. And there's specific rules that the Department of Labor, or guidelines that the Department of Labor and the EEOC, OFCCP, the regulatory agencies monitor, and you have to maintain different aspects of your data around this. And so you're looking at adverse impact and just different things. And so this is what we use in that research. It's just to protect and make sure that it's legally defensible and valid, which all the top assessment providers are definitely held to the highest standard, and this helps do that on a regular basis.
Great, thanks, Bryan. And none of this data shows to your hiring managers. So I know some of you with your HR hats on right now are thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be shown to the hiring managers. No, it's not. It's just to collect the data to really make sure these assessments are, as Bryan said, defensible and correct and accurate. So just showing some scales here, really prepping that person for the assessment. And now I'm being presented the personality assessment. This is what was selected for this particular job for this person here. So I'm going to move through the assessment here and not actually answer the questions all that accurate, everyone. Just kind of move through. There are quite a few questions here. And Bryan, while I do that, can you give us an understanding of what went into actually creating these type of questions? How did your team determine these are the type of questions to ask for this particular assessment?
Sure, and that's actually a great question, and we get asked that quite frequently, thank goodness, because there is years and years of work and data capture and working with clients and looking at performance is what all goes into it. So kind of the process, just kind of at the highest level, is you start out with you need to have PhDs who are called psychometricians. They specialize in assessment development, data analysis around assessments. And so you start out with maybe 1,000, maybe thousands of questions, and you start paring them down to see what you want to measure. So I'd showed you conscientiousness as one of the scales, and that's one. It's called the Big Five, is the theory that we use on measuring personality. So you start putting people through rounds and rounds of data. So thousands and thousands and thousands of people go through the assessment over and over and over again, and then you start to pare that down to what you're trying to measure. And ultimately, you might go from 1,000 questions starting out and pare it down to whatever that number is. We actually have 70 questions that are in our personality assessment. So that's how far we pared that down and made it as predictive as possible for a very fast candidate experience, keeping that in mind, but yet being high levels of reliability, which is also their standards that you have to meet within the Department of Labor guidelines, and we actually exceed all of those standards.
Great, Bryan. Here, everyone, just to show you an example of a different assessment. The personality assessment is what I just went through there, and this is a cognitive test here, and it's timed, a timed 7-minute assessment. And Bryan, I'm sure kind of the same process goes through in kind of creating these types of questions as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. And this is, I think, actually cognitive general reasoning assessments have been around, again, for a long time. And it's one of those that you go through the same process. You're looking at a couple different things. This really measures how quickly people process information when they get that in. So how quickly do they learn? How quickly do they process new information? We do it timed so that you know how quickly you're able to do that. It's not an IQ measure. It's really how quickly somebody processes information, and it's developed pretty much the same process as the personality is.
Great, thanks a lot, Bryan. I'm going to go ahead and stop going through the application here. I think everyone gets an idea of how this works, and I actually am going to flip over and to what a hiring manager. So let's say someone has taken the assessment, and now they're going to come through, and actually, as a manager, you're going to go and review the results of that assessment. So I'm here, I logged in as a manager, and this is kind of my manager home page, if you will. And I want to go over and take a look at some of my applicants, as you can see over here, manage applicants. So again, we'll try to keep the screen very clean and very easy for you to review. Of course, you're going to get lots of applicants, as Bryan said. You have tons of people that are going to apply when you pull an online job application out here. And the assessments allow you to really easily go through and filter these applicants through. So for instance, with the PeopleMatter tool here, we could go through and actually filter. Let's say I just want to see people that scored recommended or caution on the assessments. I don't even want to see those with discontinue. And you can do that very simply and easily here. As you can see here on the right, these are the badges, the results of the assessments. So I can look here at Blaine's application, and I can see Blaine scored a recommend on the attitude, and then Blaine scored a recommend on the cashier and associate position, but scored a discontinue on manager. So that is something that could happen. You could have someone applying for multiple jobs, an hourly position, and then a manager position. The hourly assessment, the job fit says, yeah, that person has the skills that they could really succeed in that role. But when I look at the manager job skills, the way they answer the questions doesn't quite say they meet those skills. So let's take a look at the detailed reports here. I'm going to click over on Blaine's name here and go into his actual detailed profile and see he applied for those two positions at the corner store there in Clearwater, Florida. And I'm going to go straight over to the assessments tab here. Well, if I go to the application tab, this is just his general application. But I'm going to go look at the assessments, the reports themselves. That's what I'm interested in here today. So I can see I've got two different reports. I have an attitude report here for the attitude assessment. And then I've got a job fit report for the two different jobs he applied for. And there are two different reports that are presented to me, one for the cashier associate and one for the manager, because Blaine did apply for both of those jobs. So if I select the cashier associate and I look at the job fit report here, you'll see this is the report that Bryan showed you the pieces of there in the slides. But as you can see here, we've got the conscientiousness, the tough-minded, the conventional, extroversion, and stability, stable here, the different categories that Bryan talked about. And this person scored an 88th percentile, which for the cashier associate role is a recommend to move forward with this person. Then if I would flip over to the manager role here, I can take a look at how Blaine scored differently on the manager role here. So some different things here, and the scales are different too. You can see for conscientiousness on the manager, at one or other end of the scale, you've got a poor category here. But if I look at the cashier associate area here, not necessarily a poor, only on the carefree impulsive, but not necessarily on the detailed oriented. Okay. That's just an idea of kind of the different ways you can view the assessments in the report here, and the assessment reports are always accessible to you as a manager. Bryan, anything you wanted to add on the reports that you hadn't talked about prior?
Yeah, if you scrolled all the way to the bottom, what's really important as you're out there kind of figuring out assessments is making sure that it's built in a good impression scale. And what that is this measures kind of somebody's distortion, and it's not really saying, it's not pointing out that somebody just is flat out lying to you or anything like that. I'm sure that happens. But what this does is this just tells that people either don't really know themselves or they're trying to just present themselves maybe in a little better light than is probably accurate. And so what we do is we literally give you a gauge of the accuracy of how they're answering the questions. And so the further they get away from being frank and candid, and they tend to distort or disguise their answers, we'll actually have some triggers in the system that actually does say that this data is definitely not that accurate or is definitely not accurate at all. So please make sure and note that on the report so that you don't rely and think that's exactly what I should be looking at and using. So, and it's usually less than 10% of the population that have issues with the distortion scale. So.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. All right, team. I think we've seen enough of the demo here. I'm going to pull back up our presentation briefly here, and a couple other things just wanted to point out, and I will take some time here. As Jenny said at the beginning of the presentation, I have had the great opportunity to be part of all of the PeopleMatter deployments for all of our customers throughout the country, and it's been a great pleasure. And I really have enjoyed seeing groups that were never using assessments prior to PeopleMatter actually really see the great benefit of using a screening tool such as this Flash Foods is an example. They're a 200-location convenience store and quick service restaurant group in southern Georgia and northern Florida. And Jenny Buller, a good friend of mine, has really seen with all the applications they've received because of going to an online system, the assessments really help them really get through the applicants and find those that actually have a good fit for their organization. Same example here, Fiesta Mart. Wanda Parrish over in Fiesta Mart, they're a 60-location grocery store group, large grocery store group that caters to the Hispanic population there in Texas and Houston and Dallas. They received so many applicants. And the way that Wanda has trained her managers is what Bryan said beforehand. Not that a red is bad, that means the person is going to not be a good fit, but because they have so many applicants, Wanda has trained her team to look at the people that score greens first. Look at those that score recommend. Start there. You've got great applicants right there. Don't really waste your time looking at people that are reds when you have those that are green. So that's another great example here. Domino, a convenience store group as well, they use those assessments to really get through and, again, find that best fit and the filters there along with it. And the last one, which I really want to point out, Scotty's Brewhouse. They're up in Indianapolis, Indiana. Actually, the very first client of PeopleMatter to start using our system up in Indiana. And they have seen a significant decrease in their turnover by using the assessments, by not hiring those people that actually did score that red flag, by looking at those that score green. They have seen a dramatic decrease in their turnover over their, I believe, 7 locations in the Indianapolis area there. So some really good case studies, and we have some further details of that we can provide to you if you wish to see that. So that kind of takes me, through the conversation here that Bryan and I have, and I'm sure that there are some questions that we have that we want to bring up. So Jenny, I think I'm going to turn it over to you here and see if you've got any questions you want to bring up for us that the audience has submitted.
Great. Thanks, Kenny, and thanks, Bryan. We have gotten a lot of great questions, so I'd like to answer some of those now. If you have a question you'd like to submit, there is still time. So you just simply need to type it into the questions box on your GoToWebinar panel there to the right, and we'll try to get to it here in the next couple minutes. So Bryan, I'm actually going to start with you. So the first question is, can I customize the assessment?
And that is a great question to kick off Q&A. Yes, the way that we do that, and it's not really customizing the assessment, so we don't change the questions. One of the things we're known for in the industry is we test once and then we customize or tailor how that information is used by job category. So I think the slide that we had showed with all those different job categories, what we've done is we've taken that assessment information, the questions, and then we've been able to compare that to how it looks to a good, average, and higher risk performer in a specific role, like say a cashier. And so what we're able to do for the customization is we're able to do a custom benchmark study, and that literally what we do is we localize that benchmark and adjust it based on your population. So if you were ABC company, then we would actually work with you in a fairly efficient way within a few weeks, be able to test a group of people that are kind of your high to low performers, and then we'll customize that results for, say, a cashier position so that it reflects more of your culture. And that's what you'll be looking at. So it'll be your customized cashier report that you'll look at as you compare people within the system. So great question.
Thanks, Bryan. Kenny, next question is for you. So you mentioned in a lot of your case studies here that they've been kind of looking for the green candidates and weeding out the red candidates. Can they send an automatic rejection notice to applicants who have a red or reject assessment result?
Great question. Within the PeopleMatter system, you can automatically filter out the red candidates. So those could actually be not shown to the managers. They actually automatically get filtered out. And then, yes, there could be some automatic messages that are sent back to those applicants. And, of course, we don't do it immediately. We don't want someone to hit submit and they automatically get an email saying, oh, no thanks. So we can set something up that perhaps, in 2 days after the application that they get sent an automatic message saying that they were not, didn't fit the needs or whatever the customer wants to actually place in there.
Great. Kenny, I'm going to send the next question to you. How long does it take to complete each assessment? What's the time commitment here for an applicant?
I think I'm going to ask Bryan to answer that one. I think yeah.
I definitely have that answer. So the total test experience is around 20 minutes. Some a little more, some a little less, but it averages out to about 20 minutes for the attitude, personality, and cognitive ability. So, and that's across 7 or 8 years. So we have a lot of data that kind of backs up that candidate experience, and it's definitely one of the fastest experiences in the marketplace that's available. And we've seen that if you keep it around 20 minutes or less, you tend to have the absolute least drop-off or fall-off of candidates that just bail on, self-opt out of the system because of the long experience.
Great. So this is an interesting question for you as well, Bryan. The question is, I noticed that you indicated that an extremely detail-oriented person would be a negative attribute for a manager. Can you explain why that would maybe be negative? And kind of maybe if you could just explain overall the scales and kind of why certain attributes may be a negative or a positive for a role, that would be great.
Sure, and it depending on, like I said, for a manager, if you have somebody that gets too caught up in the details, if they score all the way, for example, if they score all the way to the right, I'm not sure if that's exactly what the red area would be, but if it's all the way to the right where they're absolutely just, details just tie them up. And we've heard paralysis by analysis, and that's the kind of folks that when you're a manager, you've really got to not get completely caught up in one thing. Right, the multitasking or the overarching. You got to run the business. You got to look at the people. You got to look at the inventory. You got to look at the P&L. You got to talk to customers, and and then you start all that, all that over again. And so that's what looking at one trait just says that, hey, you need to figure out, has this person be able to push through this trait to be successful? And so what that guides you to is a question that's very specific of, give me an example of how this has been a positive or negative. Is kind of how that would work kind of with that management role. Some other examples would be if you had, for example, a multi-unit manager role, and you, in your organization, it was much more customer facing versus heavy operation where it's more your teamwork. So if you actually had to be out there and generating business, and maybe you had a catering arm to whatever your business is, and that multi-unit manager had to be involved with that, you would have to see somebody that was probably a little more on the outgoing side versus, which would be extroversion as an example. So a little more of that salesy personality because they've got to go out there and do business development. That's just part of what they do. And so that's where that custom benchmark would kick in and say, okay, our district manager or multi-unit manager role is a little bit different because we've got this maybe a catering arm to what we do. They've got to go out and help do business development, which isn't maybe typical. And so that's where the opportunity is to say, let's create something so we know that there's more of a salesy type personality or element to their personality, because ultimately you want to predict success as much as possible as you bring them into the organization. So that's where they would be probably a little more to the extroversion side versus more kind of middle of the road, versus more, like an introvert. It's really tough to go out and knock on doors and go to networking and figure out and drive business development. So that just tends to not be their natural state in doing that. Interesting enough, when you start to look at, when you get into, start to look at this more and more and you use it and people give you feedback, you'll start to see, okay, what am I? That was one of my big revelations years and years ago is, okay, what am I? As I start to look through this, and I figured out I'm a very extroverted introvert. So I need familiarity, right? I know that about myself, and that's what you want to know about your candidates coming in. So as they, you're stacking it up and figure out, okay, where do I point my priorities? That's where you're able to talk to them first and then start moving down the list of, okay, who's second, who's third, as you do the interview process and put them in front of your team and then hopefully hire the right person build a lot of business. So hopefully that answered the question.
Great. So I know we're running short on time. I'm going to take 2 more questions, but if you still have more questions, continue to submit them, because any questions that we don't get to today, I will have someone from either PeopleMatter or PeopleClues follow up with you and make sure your question is answered within the next 2 days. So don't worry, we do have your questions and we will get to them. Bryan, there's a couple questions here for you that I think kind of go together. So the first is the assessment available in other languages, and is culture taken into consideration? Specifically, this restaurant, this person has a restaurant in a hotel that caters to Japanese businessmen, so they look for English and Japanese speakers. But then there was another question as well, where somebody works for a cooperative with a different culture compared to the typical corporate environment. So they were also asking how the system would maybe fit the needs of a different culture. So if you could kind of speak to how the assessments can be catered to different cultures or languages and how that works, that'd be great.
Sure. And definitely languages. We're actually a global company, so we do business in about 8 countries. We did 2 full translations of the assessment. So we did a full translation into Spanish and to simplified Chinese, and we offered in 6 different forms of Queen's English. All of that, when we do translations, even from like U.S. English to Queen's English, like in the UK, or different parts of the world, we actually have to do cultural norming. So we do a lot of data capture. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, huge investment to figure out and make sure that that's still predictive, and then we adjust it based on the language changes and some of the different nuances of what things mean. And so that's all based on research and comparing it against performance data in working with clients in different data sets. So English, simplified Chinese, and Spanish for the language. On the culture side, that's where the custom benchmarking comes into play. So if you've got a company culture that is just dramatically different, it's not to say that our standard benchmarks that are in the system today won't work. It just means that there's maybe an opportunity to dial that up even tighter. And by doing a custom benchmark, we can capture, what your incumbent employees or your current workforce looks like, have them take the assessment, have you do some kind of ranking and comparisons, and we work with you on job descriptions, and we actually will look at that data, do the analysis, and then we're able to come back and say, yeah, it does align. So your culture is more aligned to like our standard kind of job category or success profiles, or potentially it doesn't. That's a very very good question. And if it doesn't, then we'll actually make the adjustments of what that successful through person that's challenged in that position looks like in the system. So it's a great opportunity to actually localize that or customize it.
Thanks, Bryan. And the last question is for you, Kenny. Can you talk a little bit about the recruiting process in general prior to the assessment? And included in that, can you recommend how to advertise a job opening and collect resumes, please?
Sure, Jenny, I can answer that. Using an online job application, there's so many variety of ways that you can take a job application such as PeopleMatters and broadcast that out to the masses, if you will, using the variety of tools that are out there. Of course, the number one would be you attach it to your corporate website. That makes obvious sense. But think of things such as putting it out on Twitter, attaching that job application to your Facebook page. Using something as simple as Craigslist. There's so many of our PeopleMatter customers that I know especially, and it's not even just down market, it's up market too, so your small and your large employers, they'll use something as simple as Craigslist. I know we think of Craigslist as so simple, but people, especially from the hourly workforce, are really looking at Craigslist to find jobs. And then of course, you might think if I go to Craigslist, I might not find the best applicants. Well, that's when you have the screening tool in place at the hiring assessment that can help you with that determination if that person, even if they're coming to you from Craigslist, is still a great applicant and a great person you want to hire. So that's kind of some examples of how you can utilize a tool like this and broadcast it to the masses there.
Thanks, Kenny. And thanks, everyone, for all your great questions. We've run out of time for this afternoon, but as I mentioned, if we didn't get to your question, we will definitely follow up with you directly to answer that question. And if you have questions subsequent to the webinar, feel free to reach out to me, and again, I'll make sure that your questions are answered. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll be back soon for another People Matter webinar. Our next one's coming up on February 26th, where we'll be talking about how background checks also help you screen your applicants. It's part of our screening series that we have going on right now, and so this will be the second of 3 on February 26th. So look out for more information on that on our website tomorrow. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.